Can't Hurt Me, Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds by David Goggins. Introduction. Forging an Unbreakable Mind. Have you ever felt like you were meant for more? That deep down there's a reservoir of untapped potential, a warrior spirit yearning to break free from the shackles of self-doubt and societal limitations? What if I told you that the very pain you've endured, the hardships that have tried to break you, could be the fuel to forge an unbreakable mind and achieve the unimaginable? In this audiobook summary, we're diving deep into the furnace of Can't Hurt Me, the raw and unflinching memoir by David Goggins. This isn't just a story, it's a battle cry. It's a journey into the heart of suffering and a testament to the power of the human will. We'll explore how Goggins transformed himself from a depressed, overweight young man with a traumatic past into one of the world's toughest athletes and a symbol of mental fortitude. You'll discover practical strategies to shatter your own perceived limitations, confront your deepest fears, and rewrite your internal narrative from victim to victor. Are you ready to find out how much you're truly capable of? David Goggins is a retired Navy SEAL and a former U.S. Air Force Tactical Air Control Party member who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's an ultramarathon runner, ultra-distance cyclist, triathlete, and a world record holder for the most pull-ups done in 24 hours. But these accolades only scratch the surface of his story. Goggins's early life was marked by poverty, prejudice, and brutal physical and emotional abuse. He battled obesity, learning disabilities, and a stutter. Can't Hurt Me is his unvarnished account of how he faced his demons, calloused his mind, and pushed himself to the absolute limits of human endurance. This book has resonated with millions because it's not about quick fixes or feel-good platitudes. It's about the relentless pursuit of self-mastery through brutal honesty and unwavering discipline. It challenges the conventional self-help narrative by asserting that true growth comes from embracing discomfort and finding strength in suffering. The Crucible of Childhood. I should have been a statistic. Imagine a childhood where home is not a haven, but hell. For David Goggins, this was reality. He grew up in a house ruled by a charismatic but abusive father, Toughness Goggins. Glossy on the outside, with a nice house and fancy cars, the Goggins family was anything but well-adjusted. Behind closed doors, David, his mother, and his brother endured unimaginable torment. His father, a seemingly successful businessman, controlled every aspect of their lives, particularly through his roller skating rink, Skateland. This wasn't a place of joy for young David. It was a place of forced labor, fear, and constant vigilance. He and his brother worked grueling hours, never seeing a cent for their efforts, while their mother was also controlled and abused. The physical abuse was relentless. Goggins describes nights filled with terror, his father's belt becoming an instrument of pain. He vividly recounts one incident where, at 6 years old, he jumped on his father's back to stop him from beating his mother, only to become the target himself. The psychological scars ran even deeper. He lived in a constant state of fight or flight, a survival mode that would take years to understand and overcome. His father's words, "You have nothing and you are nothing without me," echoed in his mind, shaping his early self-perception. This early life wasn't just about abuse. It was about the systematic stripping away of self-worth. He was told he was worthless, and he started to believe it. School became another battleground. He struggled with learning, a consequence of the toxic stress he endured. He was the only black kid in his class in rural Indiana, facing prejudice and humiliation daily. He developed a stutter, and his hair started falling out. Cheating became his coping mechanism, a way to survive the academic pressures when his mind felt broken. He was, by all accounts, a statistic in the making, an at-risk youth destined for failure. But here's the crucial point. Goggins doesn't share these stories for pity. He shares them as the bedrock of his transformation. He calls this taking inventory of your bad hand. What bullshit did you contend with? Were you abused, bullied, insecure? He implores us to write it all down, to give our pain shape. Because, as he puts it, you are about to flip that shit. This raw, unflinching look at the darkness is the first step towards building a calloused mind. Interesting, isn't it? How the deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths. The accountability mirror. Truth hurts. After escaping his abusive father with his mother, life didn't magically become easy. They faced poverty, living in subsidized housing, and Goggins continued to struggle academically and emotionally. The murder of his mother's fiancé, Wilmoth, a man who had become a positive father figure, plunged them back into darkness. Goggins recalls watching the news footage of his mother ducking under police tape at the crime scene, his mind a broken record of despair. Racism continued to be a brutal reality, with threats and humiliations that tested his very core. He was failing school, involved with a crowd that was leading him nowhere, and deeply insecure. He had dreams of joining the Air Force pararescue, inspired by the story of a pararescueman who survived an impossible fall, but his academic failures and lack of discipline were massive roadblocks. 2 wake-up calls finally jolted him: failing the ASVAB test required for military entry, and a letter from school stating he wouldn't graduate without significant improvement. This is where the concept of the accountability mirror comes in. One night, disgusted with himself, Goggins stood in front of his bathroom mirror and confronted the raw, ugly truth. He didn't sugarcoat it. "You are one dumb motherfucker," he told himself. "You read like a 3rd grader, you're a fucking joke." This wasn't about self-pity, it was about radical self-honesty. He shaved his head, a symbolic act of starting anew, and began a ritual. Every night he would hold himself accountable for his goals, writing them on post-it notes and sticking them to the mirror. Small goals at first. Make the bed like you're in the military, pull up your pants, shave your head. But the key was the brutal honesty. If you're fat, call yourself fat. If you're dumb, admit you're dumb. Why? Because the only way to change is to be real with yourself. This accountability mirror became his battle station. He recognized that he was his own worst enemy and that nobody was coming to save him. It was all on him. He had to stop taking the path of least resistance. He had to get to work. This wasn't about feeling good, it was about getting better. He realized that we all need thicker skin. Being soft on yourself in front of that mirror won't inspire the wholesale changes needed to shift your present and open up your future. What if you started being brutally honest with yourself about your own shortcomings? What could you achieve? The impossible task: from 297 pounds to Navy SEAL. Even after joining the Air Force, Goggins' journey was far from smooth. His dream of becoming a pararescueman was derailed by his fear of water and ultimately a diagnosis of sickle cell trait, which provided him an out he admits he took because he was terrified of the water confidence training. He knew deep down he was a quitter who had let fear dictate his future. This shame manifested physically. He ballooned to nearly 300 pounds working a dead-end job as an Ecolab exterminator on the graveyard shift, spraying for cockroaches and rats, a far cry from the warrior he envisioned. He was numb, miserable, and had accepted this reality. Then, one morning, a Discovery Channel documentary about Navy SEAL training flickered onto his TV screen. He watched men suffer through Hell Week, saw them quit, but also saw the pride and dignity of those who endured. A fire ignited within him. He realized these SEALs were everything he wasn't but wanted to be. The show's commanding officer spoke of men who detest mediocrity and seek to transcend human capabilities. And those words hit Goggins like a freight train. What followed was a Herculean task: to lose 106 pounds in less than 3 months to meet the Navy's weight requirement for SEAL training. It sounded impossible. He still had his exterminator job, studying for the ASVAB again, and now this monumental physical challenge. His first attempt to run, after over a year of inactivity, lasted only 400 yards. He collapsed, defeated, a chocolate milkshake, his comfort food, waiting to console another failure. But then, inspired by the movie Rocky, he found a flicker of resolve. He dumped the shake, laced up his shoes, and hit the streets again. This time he ran a full mile, realizing that not all physical and mental limitations are real, and that he had a habit of giving up too soon. His training regimen was brutal and self-designed. Waking at 4:30 a.m., studying, stationary biking for hours, swimming, intense gym circuits with high reps, all on minimal food. Hunger was constant, depression a natural side effect. His marriage was crumbling, but he fed off the depression, flipping it, convincing himself that the self-doubt and anxiety were proof he was finally on a mission. If he cut a workout short, the accountability mirror and his own relentless self-talk would drive him back to do even more, to ensure no shortcuts were taken. He had to pass the ASVAB, and he finally did on his 3rd try, meeting the SEAL qualification. He chose the path of a warrior over his failing marriage. He then intensified his training, swimming in near-freezing ponds in December, running in frozen clothes, pushing himself to the absolute edge. What impossible task have you set for yourself that deep down you know you can achieve if you just started? Taking souls, mastering the mind game. Hell Week. 5.5 days of continuous, brutal training with at most 4 hours of sleep. It's designed to break men, to find their limits, and then push them far beyond. Goggins describes it as a lucid nightmare, a war fought not on foreign shores, but in the mind. Explosions, machine gun fire, freezing water, and endless physical torment from instructors like Psycho Pete, whose sadistic pleasure seemed to be watching them suffer. Goggins had been through Hell Week once before, but was pulled due to double pneumonia. Now, back with Class 231, his lungs still recovering, he was more prepared mentally. He and his boat crew, which included the late Chris Kyle, American sniper, were a band of misfits. Goggins understood a crucial truth. Hell Week is a mind game. The instructors use suffering to peel away layers, not just to find the fittest, but the strongest minds. His strategy? Taking souls. This wasn't about literally harming anyone. It was about gaining a tactical advantage by demonstrating an unbreakable will. When his crew was at their lowest, exhausted and chafed, he would find something to fuel them, usually his disdain for the instructors. He'd turn their taunts into power, chanting with his boat crew, "You can't hurt boat crew too," as they pushed their 200-pound boat overhead with renewed ferocity. This act of defiance, of finding strength in their tormentors' attempts to break them, was a way of getting into the instructors' heads, of taking their souls. This concept of taking souls is a powerful tool anyone can use. It's about being your best when duty calls, especially when you feel your worst. It involves knowing your opponent, even if that opponent is your own self-doubt, understanding your own insecurities, and then flipping the script. It's about finding that second wind when you think you're utterly defeated. Goggins even found humor in the pain, humming the theme from Platoon during surf torture, which both annoyed the instructors and fired up his crew. Are you starting to see how your mindset can transform an ordeal into an opportunity? One of the most harrowing moments came when an instructor, SBG, Silverback Gorilla, ordered Goggins to swim a mile in the dark, stormy ocean to find his boat crew, who had no idea he was coming. It was a seemingly impossible and incredibly dangerous task. But Goggins knew this was more than just a physical test. It was about pushing beyond perceived limits, about defining who he wanted to be. He faced it, survived it, and in doing so cemented his own legend within the class. He was learning that excellence means showing up, especially when everything in you screams to quit. He finished Hell Week, but not without cost. A fractured kneecap. But the mental fortitude he'd gained was immeasurable. The armored mind and the 40% rule. Goggins' journey didn't end with one Hell Week or even two. A fractured kneecap in his second Hell Week, Class 231, could have ended his SEAL aspirations. But he returned for a third Hell Week with Class 235. This time, he came in with not just physical readiness, but an armored mind. What does this mean? It means developing a mindset so calloused and hard that it becomes bulletproof to self-doubt and external negativity. He realized that to build this armored mind, he had to go to the source of his fears and insecurities, his abusive childhood, the racism, the failures. He had to stop sweeping them under the rug and instead accept them as part of his story, as fuel. He had to face the devil within. He understood that his disadvantages had actually been callousing his mind all along, preparing him. This is a profound shift in perspective, seeing your pain not as a liability, but as your ultimate training ground. Then came the ultimate test during his third buds, stress fractures in both shins after Hell Week. Running was agony. Most would quit, and rightfully so. But Goggins had a different calculus. He duct-taped his legs, essentially creating soft casts, and ran on broken legs. He endured unimaginable pain, talking himself through every agonizing step, turning the pain into proof of his toughness. This is the embodiment of the 40% rule. Goggins posits that when your mind tells you you're done, you're really only at 40% of your capacity. There's a vast reservoir of untapped potential, another 60%, that we can access if we push past that initial wall of pain and self-doubt. This isn't about recklessness, it's about understanding that your perceived limits are often self-imposed by a mind that seeks comfort. To overcome this governor, you have to callous your mind by consistently pushing beyond your comfort zone. He eventually graduated buds, becoming only the 36th African American to do so. But his quest for challenges didn't stop. He took on ultramarathons, often with little to no specific training, just to see what he was capable of. His first 100-mile race, the San Diego One Day, he ran on almost no training, finishing despite his body breaking down spectacularly, pissing blood, shitting himself, feet covered in blisters. What kept him going? The cookie jar. This is a mental stash of all your past victories, big or small. When you're at your limit, you reach into that cookie jar, remember what you've overcome, and use that energy to push further. It's about remembering what a badass you are, so you can fuel yourself through current battles. What cookies are in your jar? When was the last time you truly pushed past what you thought was your limit? Goggins even faced his own mortality with 2 heart surgeries for a congenital defect, a hole in his heart he never knew he had, meaning he'd accomplished all these superhuman feats with a heart working at limited capacity. This only solidified his belief that the power of the mind is paramount. The most powerful weapon. There is no finish line. For Goggins, becoming uncommon amongst uncommon became his new standard. It wasn't enough to be a Navy SEAL. He had to push further to see what else was possible. This meant seeking out the hardest schools, like Army Ranger School, where he was the only Navy guy and faced skepticism, but graduated as enlisted honor man. It meant setting a world record for pull-ups, not for glory, but to raise money for the families of fallen soldiers, and to test his own limits again. His first attempt at the record was a public failure on the Today Show. But Goggins sees failure not as an endpoint, but as a stepping stone. He conducted a brutal after-action report on himself, identified his mistakes, like a wobbly bar and too many distractions, and came back to break the record, completing 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours. The core message here is that talent is not required. What is required is an unwavering work ethic and the willingness to schedule suffering into your day, every day. He argues against the cultural obsession with quick fixes and life hacks. True mastery comes from a relentless dedication to hard work, from understanding that your mind is your most powerful weapon. When you feel you have nothing left, that's when you find more. He believes we must constantly put obstacles in front of ourselves because that's where the friction for growth lies. Goggins' story is a testament to the idea that you can't be defined by your past, your pain, or even your own perceived limitations. He teaches us to take ownership of our circumstances, to look our failures and insecurities squarely in the eye, and to use them as fuel. His journey wasn't about achieving a certain status or a set of accolades. It was about the relentless pursuit of becoming the best version of himself, of proving to himself that he could overcome anything. He reminds us that in life there is no finish line. There's always more to learn, always weaknesses to strengthen. The question, what if, becomes a powerful tool to silence negativity and unlock potential. What if you stopped seeing obstacles as stop signs and started seeing them as opportunities? Conclusion: the empowerment of failure and the unending pursuit. David Goggins' life, as chronicled in Can't Hurt Me, is more than just an extraordinary tale of endurance. It's a practical guide to mental toughness. He teaches us that the suffering we often try to avoid is the very crucible in which our strength is forged. We learned about the power of the accountability mirror, forcing us to confront our truths, however ugly. We explored the concept of taking souls, not as an act of aggression, but as a strategy to dominate our internal battles and external challenges by displaying an indomitable spirit. And we delved into the 40% rule, the understanding that our perceived limits are often far short of our true capabilities. Goggins' journey from a childhood of abuse and prejudice to becoming a decorated serviceman and elite athlete was paved with relentless self-discipline and an almost insatiable appetite for discomfort. He shows us that the path to an armored mind is paved with the willingness to confront our pasts, embrace discomfort, and relentlessly push our boundaries. The key is not to avoid failure, but to learn from it, to use it as fuel for the next attempt and the next. So what's the ultimate takeaway from Can't Hurt Me? It's the empowering realization that you are capable of so much more than you think, that the limitations you perceive are often just stories you tell yourself, and that by embracing the suck, by stepping into the furnace of your fears and discomforts, you can forge a version of yourself that is truly unbreakable. Now I have some questions for you to see if these ideas have started to take root. What's the first excuse you'll stop making for yourself after hearing this? Remember Goggins's accountability mirror? What's one hard truth you need to confront about yourself today? What cookie from your past, a victory over adversity, can you draw on the next time you feel like quitting? Are you ready to challenge your 40% and see what lies beyond?